Hello and welcome to the Temple Tankard. I am Jim, aka Argent Wind, and I'm your host today for DM&D Chat, where we talk about all things running D&D and many other games besides that. So today we're going to be talking about house rules, and not and we'll talk about some of the house rules that I'm using in my current campaign, which is D&D 5 Fifth Edition. But I'm talking about house rules and other systems, and ways to find house rules, ways to test them, and the best ways to communicate those house rules to your players, and implement them, and sometimes even let them sunset on you if they're not working for you. But first of all, house rules in every role playing game, almost every one you look at, every one you check out there'll be a section somewhere in the rule book that specifies that the rules are a suggestion. Um, they can be changed at a whim by the game master. They can be added to, modified, ignored, whatever you need to make your campaign work, look and feel, and play the way you want it to play. So don't be afraid if something just doesn't work with the system, to try something different, to tweak a rule somewhat, to change how something works a little bit. If it's a complete overhaul of the entire system, you may want to consider jumping to a different system because there's plenty out there to play. But sometimes the game's going great, but there's that one little thing or that couple little things that just don't work for you. And so that's where house rules come in. I do play with a number of house rules in my game. Most games I play in have at least some house rules they've established, and some tweaks they make along the way. So it's not unheard of to have them within a game. In fact, a lot of times you'll find most game systems will actually have optional rules listed in the game for variations for specific rules they already have. So they kind of have their built-in house rule options that you can use. I mean, what popular house rule in fifth edition is flanking. It's not in the rules as written, but there is an optional rule for flanking that allows for that type of situation. And so there's a lot of other rules in there that you can find in the rule books themselves, optional rules, things you can do to change the feel and look and feel of your campaign within the system itself. But where to find other house rules? I mean, beyond the ones that you kind of figure out on your own through play testing and trying things out, you'll find there's a lot of people out there talking about house rules for every system that you can imagine. So if you go watch any YouTube videos or go online and just search for game system house rules, you will find a lot of resources for optional rules that might fit your campaign or your play style better. So if something's not working for you, give it a try. Look it out there, see what you can find. You may find some that just don't work. Some you would just go, no way am I doing that. Some that might sound okay, or some you may find inspire you to do something else on your own. So if you're looking for some way to modify your game in some way, uh, go out there and find them. It, and I use a word there very intentionally, modify. If you play video games online, and I'm sure a lot of you do, uh, you'll know that there a lot of times the games will have mods, and house rules literally are just mods for your game. There are ways to tweak the game to fit how you want to play. And so just like the mod in a video game might add some new option or some different game mode or some hard mode you want to do, adding survival mechanics to a role playing game setting, or um, making some abilities more powerful or less powerful. All of those things can be done through mods, just like you do with house rules for your games. So, what kind of house rules do you find out there? Um, I mentioned a few of them already, but a lot of them are ways to improve situations in a game. It might be improving the action economy, making some things easier or harder to accomplish, to balance out the gameplay a little bit there and to encourage different styles of gameplay. It might be situations where you're bringing in third-party vendor classes or abilities or other or items or things like that, where in a way that's sort of a house rule, but you establish that by bringing it into the game and telling your players about it that hey, we are going to use this option here, or this thing becomes available. Um, Hey, thanks for everyone out there. Obviously, I see Zach and Dexter's right here. Dragon's there. We got Dow and Kara and Sora. Excellent. good to see you all here, and hopefully you can throw some of your comments in here because throughout this time here, if you have a house rule that you use that you want to throw in the chat there as a suggestion, that's great too. Any questions about maybe what sort of a house rule you might consider? There, throw it in the chat there too, and we'll come back around to it when we can. But we're talking about the kinds of house rules and things there. And so beyond just third-party content or anything else like that, but you may improving your action economy, making something more powerful or less powerful. Um, Certain abilities in a game might just be game breaking, or you might find partway through your game that a combination of abilities and equipment and certain situations just destroys an encounter, and it's just very hard to deal with balancing an encounter after these abilities and stuff come together. So you may want to tweak it a little bit as a little house rule to downplay it, or in some way uh, to make it more balanced within the game. I don't want to say counteract it because you don't want to just think about counteracting your abilities. It's just more like making things a little more balanced, a little more fair. You find that certain class abilities, certain spells, certain magic items, certain equipment, specialized equipment, just can have an unintended, almost exponential effect on a power level for a character, and they just become the one that break every campaign and break every encounter you run into. So you might tweak something a little bit just to kind of bring that more in line with the rest of the party. Um, you know what? I'm going to answer the question right now because it's a great question. What is the worst house rule I've ever encountered? I don't think I've ever encountered any really terrible house rules. Um, I've dealt with situations where a house rule that could have been good wasn't quite implemented well enough. And Zach, you can probably guess what I'm talking about here. A variant of a game where you had a lower power level in the game. And that was a good idea for the concept we were working with. It just didn't work out in terms of character progression. I'm talking specifically about in D&D 5e, there's a variation suggestion for a gritty game where character advancement stops at level 6, or maybe stops at level 10. You don't get under those like superpowered levels of those higher level games. In Pathfinder, they had a version called E6, which basically went to power level 6, and that was it. And then you could still gain things beyond that, but what you gained wasn't really interesting or all uh, all that much fun because you get stuck in the lower powered in the version of the game, and you can't really progress beyond to the more interesting things. Um, I mean, and some variations in terms of house rules, in terms of class progression or level progression, that can really stymie the fun of a game. Because if your character never changes, never grows, never gets more powerful, or if it takes forever, it can be a little bit frustrating to kind of go there. Now, if the narrative of the game is fun and the game and the mechanics are fun and the interplay between the characters is great, that can kind of go by the wayside. But when when you're in one frustrating encounter after another because you're not gaining any abilities, that's kind of rough. So, probably one of the worst house rules I saw was kind of that if you're going to do some sort of a level cap, really consider the types of encounters you're running into and work on the game balance and ways of making your characters still feel like they're making progress. So that's because that's important in a role playing game. You don't want your characters just sitting there doing nothing. So that's what it's one of the things I've run into in terms of not so great house rules. Um, Other kinds of house rules, like level progression. House rules might be in a certain setting that's a low magic setting. You might not allow certain classes. You might not allow certain types of spells. You might um, uh, you might want to downplay the types of magic items that people get, or lower the power level of those things, or make them exceedingly rare so that it's a very big deal when they come about there. It's still it's part house rule, part campaign style, and there's a little bit of a bridge between those things where a lot of your house rules are trying to allow you to simulate a certain style of campaign, a certain style of story that you're trying to work through. Okay, so um, uh, the that sort of so a lot of these like kinds of house rules lend themselves to that sort of thing where you're trying to get a certain feel for a game. You want a darker, grittier, more horrifying, um, uh, more of a threat in the world. Well, letting characters get to level 15, 20 in D&D or letting characters get to superpowered levels in other systems, the threat lessens. And so you have to kind of do something to keep that threat level like at a point where characters still are concerned for their safety and aren't just going to charge through and just destroy everything in their path. That kind of game can be fun, but if you try and go for something different there, it's hard to balance that. Um, yes, and yeah, as Dragon here mentions here, the campaign I was talking about there, we didn't even though the campaign was stopping at level 6, we never got there after a year of playing. So we were still weren't progressing. We still weren't moving along. We still weren't getting those abilities, those advancements. And so we never got to the interesting part of it. We just sort of like we sort of like slogged our way through the lower levels and never got to a place where we felt like we were doing something. So again, that idea is a good idea, but the implementation of it is something you have to watch out for. Um, and that brings us to something else. Sometimes these house rules, like in this case, can totally break a campaign and just make it so it's not so much fun. Sometimes the house rule you implement may just have unintended consequences of just make it just becomes too much of a log in dealing with that mechanic. It becomes a situation where people are too powerful or not powerful enough. And so you may find that you need to drop a house rule. And don't be afraid to do that. If something's not working out right there, you can just talk to your players, tell them, hey, this isn't really working out. I don't think you're having fun with it. It's annoying for me. Let's just drop this or go back to this rule instead. And talk it over with them. Make sure they're aware of it. Don't just say, hey, I don't like this. We're getting rid of it. Talk to them. Let them know you're thinking. Let them know what your thought processes are. And if they agree with it, then hey, we're all good. We do that. We need that consensus together. Same with your initiating house rules in the start. Make sure if you're planning for house rules in a situation in your session 0, when you first start a campaign, lay out those house rules that everyone knows. And then you can discuss maybe other ones that someone might have. Somebody come up with, hey, game I played, this is a really cool idea that we had, or I heard about this one on this YouTube channel, or I was watching this campaign from somebody else and they use this thing here. And that may be something that once you talk it over, you may want to implement that. Say, yeah, that sounds good. We can do that. And then add that to the game. Um, I would say a little less creating new house rules mid-campaign, but there are going to be situations where it may come up. As I mentioned before, if a combination of class ability, spell, magic item, equipment, whatever, this combination of things comes together in a way that just becomes too powerful, you at that point, as I said, you might want to tweak something back or change something how it works. Just because it's no fun when things become trivialized. So that's the thing where you may need to implement a house rule halfway. It also may be something that you didn't intend because once you reach a certain level, there becomes an issue of, well, certain power level in the game. This becomes trivialized. In order to keep things challenging, you might need to like let's implement this thing or this thing hasn't happened a whole lot yet, but let's see if we can add this into the game. And again, talk to your players, discuss it, talk about the situation, and then if people are receptive to it, then add it to the mix. See how it goes. If it doesn't work, drop it again. There's no reason you can't tweak the game to fit your needs as you go. Okay. Um, the golden rule for house rules is this. Ask yourself this very important question. Does the rule enhance the game experience? If this enhances the game in some way that makes it more fun, more challenging, more interesting, then it's a good house rule. If it's just something that just becomes eh, or oh, all you're doing is you're just nerfing me. Again, does it enhance the game experience? If it's something where you just take something away from somebody, that's not going to be fun. Modifying how it might work there, or making something that makes a little more in balance with other things, that's where it can still work. So think about always wanting to try to enhance your game with your house rules. Um, I did mention this before here, but it bears repeating. You will find a lot of house rules within the rule books themselves. For D&D, there as I mentioned before, in D&D, the flanking is a house rule. It's an optional rule you can implement if you want to. So that's something. So a good resource for house rules is the actual game book. So see what people that the game designers have said. Hey, here are some things to think about. And so that might be something you want to incorporate. Um, the people notice unless they've read the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5e, they have mechanics for sanity. They have mechanics for madness. They have mechanics for grittier, dark, or more difficult role play where they change the rest mechanics of a game. So, and those are all in the Dungeon Master's Guide as optional rules you can implement. You may find doing a little bit of research that other people have said, "Hey, that's not quite this, or this might be work a little better," but it's something you can at least take as inspiration from and think about moving forward with that. So next, I'm going to talk about some of my house rules. And this is D&D 5e centric because that's the campaign I'm running is 5e. But some of these house rules may have applications within other game systems as well. The idea of the justification for the house rules definitely can have applications in any system. So, first of all, um, how you handle outnumbering someone or flanking someone, outmaneuvering someone. The optional rule is just for flanking in D&D is that two people are flanking on opposite sides of a creature, they both get advantage. That I don't like that because I want to uh in what's what I'm looking for here. I want to encourage people to use the other plethora of ways to get advantage in the game, and to always rely on that one mechanic becomes a crutch that too many people like use to greater too often, I should say. So instead, I use an outnumber mechanic where basically if you are double teaming someone, you get a +2 to hit, or you can lower that person's armor class by 2, depending on how you want to implement that in your system. If you're 3 or 4 people on one, you might increase that bonus even higher. You might not just say that it's always a flat +2. It depends on how you want to deal with it in your campaign. But the outnumbering mechanic is, I feel, it still gives a reward for doing um uh that we're gonna team up on this guy over here, focus fire on this guy, and then then we're gonna go over here. And so it still gets that idea of tactics involved without just saying, I go here, you go here, we get advantage. I mean, it's just not as much. I don't think it's not as interesting. Um, and then and then what's interesting is that what I did as well when I implementing this, I created a feat for my game that was basically defensive dervish that allowed you to ignore the outnumber mechanic. You were used to fighting in crowds. That was you had special training in fighting in groups of people, so you ignored that mechanic. So um, and you can other benefits as well. But the idea that you not only create a situation where you have a benefit, you then create a way to either benefit more or potentially negate the benefit in certain situations. Again, uh, 2 households for the price of one. Another one I created, I use in my games is healing potions, a bonus action to use a healing potion. That means, and you roll the healing dice. However, to make this a little more interesting, I said if you use your full action to take the potion, you get the full amount. And if you're out of combat, you can take the full amount. Justification for this is the healing potions in mine, the ingredients tend to settle at the bottom, or you have to slug it back there and it might spill some of it. So as a bonus action, you may not get the full effect of it. Whereas if you take as an action, you shake it up carefully, you put it into your mouth, and you down the entire contents carefully enough as a full action. And that way you get the full benefit from the healing potion. And if you're out of combat, again, same thing. You can take the time to shake it up and then take the potion. The caveat is that giving a potion to somebody else is still an action, and you still roll that because again, you're trying to dump it in their mouth, and there can be situations there. But just different ways of using potions, using healing potions. Other potions, I do say that require your full action to use. To take a potion of invisibility, to take a potion of giant strength, those take your full action to use. Because again, those are an all or nothing thing. You either get the full benefit or you don't. The healing potion, there's a partial benefit that comes from it if you don't get the whole thing in your mouth. Um, so that's again ways to use action economy a little bit differently. You still get the benefit of healing, but you get more benefit if you take the full action. Um, in my games, I have everyone get first level feats. I like feats in D&D. I like the concept of them. It sets you apart from every other first level cleric, fighter, wizard, whatever else that by having a feat. I do have the preface that those feat can have the words master or expert in the name or description. This cancels out things like taking sharpshooter at level one or taking crossbow expert at level one. Again, you need to be a little bit higher level before you get those things, but you get some fun things at level one that set you apart from every other version of the same first level character of that class. Because variations there, and I figure um, adventurers are going to be in a situation where they've had extra training. They're the crazy people going out there to fight those big monsters. They're not just holding up in the town, reading books in the library or guarding the front gate, or out there hunting deer to feed the town with. So personal feats there are something I encourage there. Um, inspiration. Uh, the ways inspiration, I believe, actually is an optional rule in D&D, but I wanted to clarify it in my party. First of all, you always start a session with inspiration. We get one free inspiration per session. And occasionally by doing really cool things, you might earn another inspiration, or if you use your inspiration, you might earn it back by doing cool things. Crazy combat maneuvers, great teamwork setups there, delivering that great one-liner, that snarky comment to the big bad that that's the room, kind of that ooh moment. So those kind of things where you kind of reward that gameplay with an extra inspiration if they've already used theirs. Um, I also let inspiration be used for your allies, so you can use your inspiration to help your ally as well, because that way, again, inspiration can be about teamwork in that sense. So that person blew that saving throw. You want to help them out? I'm going to use my inspiration. And I usually ask someone to tell me how you're inspiring them. Tell me how you're helping them out in this situation. And it might be they're pushing them out of the way or pulling them out of the way or something, or they're like breaking the concentration for a moment there to get them to shake off a spell effect that's happening to them or something along those lines. Um, I have a couple of ones, but one of the ones I think that a lot of DMs are finding um, a good purchase in their games is the concept of the rule of cool. Of sometimes something is just too cool to fail, and it's one of those things of they make this great. Nothing is more frustrating in a story where I'm going to do this cool maneuver and then they roll a one, or they roll even worse, they roll a three, and they miss the guy, or they want to do this cool acrobatic thing like that. Describe this cool acrobatic action there, and they roll a two, and they fall on their face. It's really takes the wind out of the sails of everybody. You describe a cool action, you come up with a cool idea, and it fails because of the dice rolls. So my thing is in the situation where sometimes you just say, don't make a roll, it works. Or you might say, make a roll for the degree of success. Tell me, let's see how good it looks. And that way, the rule of cool is like, it happens. But you can throw in a little things like you stumble a little bit, but you manage to catch yourself and still leap out and grab onto that railing and pull yourself up in one smooth action there, but it's a little rough at the start. Um, the idea that, oh, I'm going to do this really cool sword flourish and take this guy's head off, and you stumble, and instead of taking his head off, you stab him in the foot. He screams, and you stand up and take his head off that way. Or just some other descriptive way to make that action still happen because it was a cool idea, but they aren't screwed over by a dice roll. So it's something, it doesn't come into play all the time, but every now and then it's a good thing to keep in mind, is that as an idea for how to encourage that descriptive narrative type actions there, and that fun role playing aspect without letting the dice mess it all up. Now, that's part of the game in a way, but I wouldn't use it often, but occasionally it's just a fun moment to have where you just say, "Yep, it happens," or "That is too cool to fail, so it happens." So keep that in mind. Again, it's a house rule. There's not really mechanics around it specifically, but it's something to keep in mind that you want to tell your players that this occasionally will happen um, in your game. There's a few other minor things I'm thinking of, but some potential future ideas for future type um, um, house rules. Maybe I not implemented now, but I've heard about that might be considered interesting. Is having more hidden roles. And this applies to any system. If your system doesn't already have a mechanic for the players making a role, you making a role for the players, and they don't know if they succeed or not, or because the situations where they don't know what they don't know. If they make a perception check and they roll a 2 and they go, "Oh, I didn't see anything." Doesn't mean there wasn't anything there. It just means that they know they rolled terribly, so they realize that, "Oh, I guess I blew a perception check. I don't know what's here." So it takes away that sort of like uncertainty of the situation. So maybe you rolling their perception checks for them and explaining what they see based on how well that you rolled for them can really add that uncertainty to the situation where the player wouldn't know if they succeeded or failed, making an insight check. And in situations where you can use passive stats, that can work as well. But the idea that you may want to do more hidden roles. In 5e, some DMs use a thing where the DM rolls death saves. The player doesn't know if they fail, if they succeed or fail until you describe them breathing their last gasp. The other players out there don't know how close they are to death. They just know they're unconscious on the ground. And they need to get to them to save them because they might be failing death saves they don't know. Or they might suddenly miraculously pop up because you rolled that natural 20. And so the cool thing about that is you don't need to worry about modifiers. You don't need to worry about anything. In fact, in a lot of these situations with hidden rolls, you may not care about a modifier. You might just roll to see they roll high or they roll low. Do they do really high or really low? And using it as sort of a degree of success for someone, that way the players aren't getting knowledge that they shouldn't have. Whoop, guess I failed a perception save. They roll a stealth check and go, did I roll well enough? Nope, I didn't roll well enough. So obviously everyone's going to see me now. Maybe, maybe not. So the idea of being able to describe something based on a role that they don't know the actual result of can really add some fun mechanics to the game. Um, House rules that change action economy. If you want to encourage certain types of actions, like I did with the bonus action with healing potions, I didn't want it to ruin someone's action by taking a healing potion. That's all they can do, and their turn is done. So move on to the next person. That's not very fun. So something that allows for more variation of actions is a good thing. Pathfinder 2 does a good job of this in that everyone has 3 actions to do whatever they want. The only weakness of that in Pathfinder 2 is the fact that everything is an action. So you take you walk 10 feet, there's your action. You want to walk 10 more feet, you want to throw something and then walk 10 more feet, there's another action, there's a third action. It's not like you can really break things up and do things in a way that makes it fun. It's just you have a lot more variability of what you can do. I think D&D 5e has a little trouble with that because that action, bonus action, move action, there needs to be more things that count as those things. More options for bonus actions for certain classes, especially. Certain classes have plenty, but there's a lot of classes that have almost none. Um, uh, Things you can do as a move action besides just standing there. I mean, I'm going to stay here and keep shooting at someone. well, you're wasting your move because you're not doing anything. So something you could do as a move action would make something a little more interesting as things go. Hey there, Turnip. Good to see you. Um, so having things, some house rules that allow for better action economy in games, or depending on the system, you may find that some systems do action economy really, really well. And so you think about that. Think about that. That's sort of how you can incorporate those kind of ideas into other game systems to make the games more dynamic and more fun. Um, in 5e, one thing that's really difficult is the resting mechanics. The idea of a long rest, giving you back everything, a short rest, giving you little things like that. There's a lot of house rules based around making long rests take longer. Some really brutal ones taking like a long rest is a week's worth of downtime. It's in a certain campaign setting that may work, but in most campaign settings that just doesn't lend itself to um, doing too much can happen over the course of a week, and so just taking a week off to rest and get your thing there, everything can change in that time while you're just sitting around healing. Um, Maybe more realistic, but also more difficult to balance timelines during campaigns. But anything that's going to change your resting mechanics might change the feel of your game. So something you may want to consider is if things are taking like some people say short rest take less time, and some people say long rest take longer. So it really kind of comes down to what you kind of feel you want to have in your game. Um, the one thing to consider, and this is something that people don't realize in 5e a lot, is that they based the idea of a long rest on having 6 to 8 counters per day, encounters per day. Now, I want to think about a campaign about sessions. How often do you manage 6 to 8 encounters before someone long rests? Very seldom does that happen. That could be a course of like 2 or 3 sessions, depending on how fast things are happening, what's going on there. So the idea that they can just like have an encounter, blow everything there, long rest. Next day, another encounter, blow everything, long rest. So it's a little too much. That's a good one here. I'll come back to that in just a minute there, Kara. Um, so again, just to kind of wrap up here with the house rules, um, thinking about ways to do um, uh, to enhance your game to make it feel the way you want it to feel. That's what house rules are for. So don't be afraid to try some out, and don't be afraid to try it. If it doesn't work, to drop it. If something needs to be modified uh, midstream for some reason, talk to your players and do it. The main thing, again, as always, is with communication. Talk to your players. Tell them what you're thinking. Tell them what you want to see. And a lot of times they're going to say, yeah, sounds good. Or they may say, I don't like that. And then you kind of go back to the drawing board. But really, don't be afraid to try out some different things here. Um, so for a future show, uh, request a video doing where I unbox the content of my bookshelves and talk about some of the resources that I have and that you may have at your disposal too. That's a great idea. I think I'm going to take a note of that one. That could be a fun one to do. I did a little bit of talking about different systems that I've played, but yeah, seeing more up here that could be a lot of fun. Thanks for the suggestion, Kara. Perfect. Um, Dragons, there's potions will become a huge commodity in a 1 week long rest system. Oh God, absolutely. The idea that you could like a potion will speed up your healing. Um, Mana potions to restore spell slots, maybe in that kind of a situation there. You might get a spell slot back and extend the time you have before you need to long rest. Ideas where exhaustion mechanics can set in because you haven't long rested for a while, but you just keep slogging away at things. That could be a fun way to really add some more almost like epic style content of that time of um needing to use potions, needing to use scrolls, conserving those spell slots or finding ways to get spells back can be a really huge thing in that kind of a system there. So that's a good point there for a week long rest system. you're going to use different. You use all your resources very differently. Using your hit dice is a very big thing in that kind of setting. So, excellent suggestion there. Yeah. Curious background that from Dow here. Would it be interesting if someone is a juggler to give advantage for two d20 dice with the theory that you're a juggler? They have a better chance at it. I think can be definitely mechanics around the idea that someone who's really good at something, using a certain aspect there. Um, I think there are certain mechanics you could come off by that. The idea of changing the steady aim mechanic from rogues, where you basically say, I'm going to use steady aim, but instead of aiming, I'm going to juggle to confuse someone and then throw a knife out at them while they're trying to watch my performance. Doing a cool thing, maybe a performance check. There's an inquisitive rogue that can do a insight check against somebody to then get advantage on them. But the idea of doing a performance check to distract them to then get an attack with advantage could be a fun way to go too. So fun suggestions. There's different ways you could do incorporate a different skill to change a play style there or make a very cool, interesting idea there. That's cool. I think that could be fun. Um, Dragon there. I limited inspiration. Players get 3 or 4 Bs at the end of each session. Players can spend 1 B to get advantage, 3 Bs to get advantage after they've rolled, or 10 to get a plus 20 to the roll. That's really cool. I mean, I like that. That way they can build up over time, getting and it's essentially the beads are sort of like inspiration points, but you use it differently. You have it call it something different there. I like that. That's a situation where they can kind of build up and save a resource and then really go for it in some way. Yeah, I like it. That's a cool way to go. I mean, um, the one thing I would be careful of is spending 1 B to get advantage gives a little bit too much of an of a benefit to a rogue who can just go, I get advantage, sneak attack. I get advantage, sneak attack. But I mean, it's a way to use it, so why not? I mean, if you worked it out there, that'd be really cool. I like that. Um, so looking ways to handle inspiration differently. There's a lot of different ways out there. You're going to find like this, or you'll find a lot of different ways, suggestions for using inspiration out there on the internet there. And so if it's not working for you one way, try a different way. That's a really great way to go. Um, there's a background stage, so Arcana history, 2d20, because you should be more able. Yeah, having the idea where certain backgrounds or certain things might get advantage in certain beyond just a proficiency, getting maybe even like allowing them expertise in one of those roles, or allowing them advantage maybe once a day, or uh, proficiency modifier times per day. That could be a fun way to go too. Maybe you tie that to a feat, like advanced, created a feat for like advanced knowledge or learned scholar or something you want to call it this way, and then you definitely could easily just say proficiency number of times per day, you can just choose to gain advantage on an Arcana or history check. That'd be a cool way to go. And you may even go one further, saying it requires a sage background again, or the acolyte background, or so again, you can just that'd be a fun way to incorporate a feat that ties into backgrounds because we don't really have that in 5e. It'd be fun to have more things that tie into background as class options or as feat options. Um, So, Dragon, I ran a campaign where the player got a feat at level 1 and got both a feat and an ability score increase as it leveled up. Super high powered game. Um, the players loved it. The DM, did not love it. I could see that. When all of a sudden you have by 12th level, they've got like like 3 18s and a 20 in their stat block, and all these crazy feats to deal with as well. I kind of I wish there were ways to have get more feats in the game, but there are something as too many. And I do like the concept that they're moving forward with, I think in 1D&D, where they're saying that ability score increase is a feat. And it behaves as increase ability by 2 or increase 2 abilities by 1. Um, or something along those lines there. So the idea that ability score increase is a feat, um, that'd be really cool. Um, yeah. Uh, How do you feel about pulling rules from other systems into D&D 5e? This is from Zach here. For example, pulling the dragon idea from the age system and tying it to a damage die. I love that concept. I've heard fun things, even taking things from previous editions of D&D, also kind of cool. Like taking a mechanic that you liked from an older version and bringing it into a new one here. I saw a great suggestion for using some of the crazy like one-off abilities that certain classes or certain equipment got from fourth edition and making that as abilities you got similar in for 5e, because there were some cool things in fourth edition in terms of like those class abilities and item abilities and that. So yeah, bringing in things from other systems is a great way to go. If you've been playing a lot of different systems there and you say, I really like this mechanic, I really like how the hero points work in this thing, or I really like how the inspiration type mechanic works over here, or with the more places you can draw from, the more fun things you can do in a campaign. It's like a smorgasbord. You take the best of everything and make it all make what you want of it. And again, it just adds to the fun. It adds to the flavor of your game, to make it different from other games or just to make it more interesting. So yeah, the idea of for those of you who don't know, the dragon die from the age system there, basically age system uses the 3d6 system, but one die is a different color. It's the dragon die. And so what happens is when you make a check, if you get doubles, then the dragon die does fun things. Like it'll add stunt points you can use for maneuvers. Um, or you can also be the cause of fumbles in the case if you fail, the dragon die might um, be worked into what happens on that fumble. Or there's other like certain spells or abilities that you roll and let's say the stun like a stun type spell. If the stun hits, the person doesn't resist. The dragon die determines how long it lasts. So it's a fun way to get variable mechanics in ways and use this interesting die mechanic there. That's a cool idea. Um, to bring in those other mechanics like that. Um, you find that, I mean, this isn't really a house rule situation, but bringing in monsters or ideas or um, items from other systems in a way you sort of make a homebrew almost, but that way you have more to draw on, more ideas to draw on, and bringing in systems like using if you wanted to bring in madness rules and sanity rules and you didn't want to use the D&D option D&D 5e optional rule, look to Call of Cthulhu. They've got a whole sanity system and how that thing's worked there. Maybe using the madness tables from that system is a great way to go to incorporate that into a horror based game. Um, and then working out a mechanic for how that gets implemented in the game there. Again, it's a much more advanced house rule, but it adds a lot of fun, interesting things there. Um, yeah, like you max damage on a dice or something. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So um basically, yeah, rolling. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to think about that. Potentially, if you roll with advantage and get the same value on both d20s, that could have some sort of interesting effect happening. Um, the I already do sort of a thing where like if you roll with advantage and get two 20s, something big is going to happen. If you roll with advantage and get two ones, something crazy is going to happen. So the idea that yeah, incorporating that like those weird situations might have an unintended effect. So something to consider there. Let's see, did I miss anything? Let's scroll up a little bit here. Um, oh, perfect. Yeah, I missed this one from Dragon here. Um, House rules from Pathfinder, I think in other systems as well here, where the players make most of the rolls. So rather than having the DM, and I believe Cypher works this way, right? Zach, coming this way here, the DM doesn't make any rolls. They set a difficulty, and the players make a test. So in other words, when I attack someone, I use my attack values, and if I beat the target, whatever it is, based on the situation there, then I do damage and go forward. When I'm being attacked, I make a defense roll against a difficulty based on the enemy I'm fighting. And if I fail, then I take damage. And so that way the DM isn't always going, oh yes, we're going to go ahead and uh, keep rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. And like, no, we have um, the player making the rolls, and the DM is just setting difficulties and sitting back, watching and laughing, um, sometimes maniacally. But the idea that it's a different way to go things, and so it's almost the opposite of doing more secret rolls. The DM makes rolls for the players, so they don't know what's going on. So again, you have these different concepts. There actually, I did see a house rule 4 or 5E where they talked about changing armor class to being a defense roll, where basically you made a defense roll against a target equal to your enemy's attack bonus, and then that way the enemy wasn't attacking you. You just rolled defense to see if you managed to dodge it or block it or whatever else that. And so you rolled your attacks to hurt them and rolled your defense to not be hurt by them. And so the die rolls came more in the player's court, and the DM just sat there and set difficulties. So different way to go. Definitely interesting way to change up mechanics that may add a certain twist to your game. It's more fun. Let's see here. Those are most of the ones that I run into specifically myself. I have a couple other minor things here and there, but don't really need to go into those so much there. One thing I like to do, and this is sort of a general thing there, is giving players more ways to advance beyond just a level up. Like if you have downtime and you want to learn a new language and you have somebody in the party that speaks the language you want to learn, spending time in that downtime or that travel time as you're walking across country, you have to go and do like you're just practicing the language, talking back and forth. You have a language, a language like learning Sylvan for Dummies, a book that you're reading there to try to learn the language as you go. So the idea is that learning those kinds of things, or even potentially learning feats, if they're always doing something in their downtime to try to get to work toward a feat, and they describe that and they plan for that, why not? I mean, when at some point they may have the opportunity to gain a bonus. Maybe you want to make sure that bonus is like on par with other players' bonuses, but the idea that you could reward players for thinking beyond just what do I do when I level up? Thinking, what am I doing to improve myself? What am I doing to train? What am I doing to learn new things? And so if they're a fighter, they may never get an opportunity to learn a language because unless they want to take the linguist feat as one of their fourth or eighth level rare feats that they get. So again, allowing options for those kind of things. They don't break the game. They make the characters more interesting. They make the characters uh, have more variability beyond just their class abilities. So I encourage that kind of thing in my players where they want to learn a language, they want to learn a tool proficiency, they want to get a little stronger. I'm constantly working out. I want to be stronger because I'm a weak little gnome with a 6 strength and I want to get tougher. So let them go to a 7 after a time if they like they're always working out there in their downtime and doing their push-ups, and those are the kind of things where why not? It doesn't hurt the thing. It doesn't give us one a huge advantage. And I wouldn't say like, oh, I'm at that 19 strength and I want to get to a 20 and when I just do nothing but that. You may want to say that's a level up option. You're trying to max out your level. That's a major training thing. But if it's like a wizard trying to be a little bit more art, being a little bit more charismatic and he's taking acting classes, sure, why not? Let the wizard go to 11 charisma. Doesn't hurt anything, and it's still a reward. It's still a change or progress they can make. So I do encourage those sort of like out of the out of like certain rewards they can have for coming up with ideas beyond just their level up, beyond just spending the experience points there that they're gaining in a hero type system or something like that. Offering up a bonus or a discount on something, if it's a point buy system, making something a little bit cheaper because they want to do something that's out of the norm for their character. Sure, why not? Um, So definitely things to think about there. Again, it enhances the game. It enhances the experience for you and the players because those players come to life. They take an interest in something. So reward that. Allow them to do something or incorporate house rules that take advantage of that fact or give them the opportunity to do that. I know there's a lot of issues around in certain systems about crafting, about downtime and what to do with downtime and all that. So any house rules you can implement to improve that experience there um, is a cool way to go. It's a cool thing. Um, as Dragon's Up property is a great reward without a mechanical bonus. Gaining a house for completing a certain mission, or getting maybe being rewarded with a horse or something like that because of accomplishments in there. Oh, something that gives them a benefit without being something that's going to be overpowering for the character. Property is a great example there. Um, uh, getting the service of a follower is going to help them outside of camp time. Um, and it's really something that you can think about what to do with that downtime. And the idea is that maybe that property is a fixer upper. Now they have things to do with their downtime. And so we want to get some better furniture. We want to make things cooler. That's the idea is that it's going to enhance the game. It's going to enhance the player's experience there. And yeah, downtime needs a better book. I think if you haven't already seen it, Strongholds and Followers, Matt Colville's MCDM company there. This has a lot of good downtime suggestions there, ways to make your property work for you. If you want to have a players that get a little chance to do more with their downtime and think beyond just the next adventure, this is a cool idea here to think about there, Strongholds and Followers. Um, Not everything here is great, but there's a lot of fun stuff in here. I would say check it out there if you're looking for something to look into for downtime. Um, let's see. And so little show and tell of something else I pulled out from the back there. Um, but yeah, anything you find and you may find other systems that are really great with rewarding downtime or ways of doing things. Um, I've taken things from like Hero System or GURP, the idea of certain abilities or feats or advantages, disadvantages, that kind of thing like that. And those can be brought in and translated as feats in your game. They be translated as a way to do a class abilities differently. So looking through those books sometimes saying, hey, this is a cool thing here. That would work great for this class, or that would work great for this race. That would work great as something they could train to do. That's on there. So again, you never know where you're going to find inspiration in terms of other game systems, other resources. And so when looking for a house rule, if you want something to increase in there, check other systems. You don't need to make it all from scratch. You may find a good rule from a different game that would work really well. If you want to get into having some sort of a bead system like Dragon was talking about earlier for adding in mechanics, think about using something similar to the Fate system, where you have Fate dice and Fate points that could be then added into as a mechanic you can use in a D&D game where you have Fate dice or Fate points that then allow you to gain advantage or make rolls there. So there's nothing holding you back from your own game of incorporating these things from other places and using them in a way that's interesting and fun. Um, just any other questions out there? Kind of throw them my way. Any other suggestions? I would love to see them. Um, we're running low on time here, but I got time for one or two more questions. Um, uh, let's see here. One other rule I do use for D&D. It's kind of a minor one, but it's one that it has helped in a lot of situations, and that's the idea of spells with expendable components, like using that 300 gold pieces worth of diamonds to do the Revivify, or that 1,500 gold pieces worth of diamonds for that Raise Dead spell, or some other things like that. The idea that, I mean, in some ways you want to have ways of making the death mechanics a little mean a little bit more. One suggestion I see is that anytime you go unconscious and start making death saving throws, you gain a level of exhaustion. when you get back up there, you have a level of exhaustion. And there's rules around how making exhaustion mechanics a little bit different so they aren't quite so devastating. Um, so there's different ways you can deal with that. But one of the things that I was considering that they use there is for those expendable components. Like it requires you to expend um, a 100 gold piece diamond, whatever. What I use in my game is that if you have a diamond worth 10 times the amount listed, it's not expended. It becomes an arcane focus that's reusable for that spell. So essentially, you make yourself a focus that's not going to be used up by having something worth 10 times the amount listed. Now, in certain games with high, that becomes a little bit too easy. So you may want to consider something maybe 50 times more, or whatever you want to go with. The idea that having a mechanic that lets your players do things that aren't so punishing. Or maybe that spell works a little bit differently. Or maybe you have to give up something else besides money. Um, Maybe that person has a drawback beyond just exhaustion or something else that has to be overcome over time. There are ways to implement story ideas into that make a mechanic that some people they have a difficulty uh, um, with keeping that or doing that, then you can work in a house rule to overcome that problem, or make it so that it's more fun. And yeah, the idea of working with a fist size diamond, I love it. The players in my game, they the temple in the town where they were living, they have their house now, for quite a while now. The local temple to the Raven Queen had the Raven's Eye diamond. It was a scepter with a golf ball sized black diamond that was worth 15,000 gold, which means it could be reused as raised dead, a 1,500 gold piece diamond, 15,000 gold piece diamond there. That could it'd be a reusable focus for raised dead. Um, so again, that becomes sort of a temple artifact. People are going to be walking around with that typically. You don't just walk around with 15,000 gold pieces. That becomes an artifact of that temple. And then when it gets stolen by some bad guys, the party has to go find it again. It can take a while, and that's a whole side quest you can have happen there too, where helping out the temple to recover their lost diamond. That's a cool way to go too. Having that resource available to them, they may not be walking around with it in their pocket, but they have access to it through having a good relationship with a temple or with a someone who does have that item. So um, having a rogue pickpocket going around stealing diamonds from everybody. Hey, in certain settings, that's a brilliant thing to have because yeah, you never know what you're going to find on some of those adventurers. The only problem is those adventurers will kick your butt if they do catch you at it. So, um, so we'll go ahead and call things there for today. If you have other thoughts for house rules you want to drop in the comments below, that'd be great. If you enjoyed this, give us a like there. Always appreciate that to see those likes there. If there's anyone who's looking for information about house rules, recommend the video to them and let them check things out there. But I hope that you guys all have fun finding your house rules, finding what works for you, and trying those new things out there because it does make a game more of your own. So find your house rules, find those things that are going to make your games more customizable. Mod your game so that way you have the best experience you can have. So, as always, we are here on the House of Gamers. We're looking for games to play or want to run games, looking for players. We have places for to do that. We have some campaigns that are still upcoming. We have a Starfinder campaign that still needs some players, I believe. We have one shots that happen throughout the year, some holiday one shots that happen throughout the year. If you're looking for just a game to jump into and have fun with, there, our one shots are a good place to do that. Um, but yeah, we'd love to see you at the House of Gamers. Check it out there and join in the fun. So as always, thanks for hanging out with us at the Tankard here. And hey, drinks around me next time. So I'll buy you guys around. So have fun, and we'll see you again real soon. Take care.